trickle in. Are we live? Welcome, everybody. Wonderful to see all of you here today. My name is Allison McCaffrey, and I'm the Executive Director of Washington Nonprofits. We're going to start this evening's festivities with a training. If you would, we are recording this session, and if you are going to ask our trainer, Nancy, here to a question, if you would speak into the mic, a few inches from your face, that would be great. So, without further ado, Nancy Amadei has agreed to talk to us about advocacy and getting involved and getting engaged. She runs the Civic Engagement Project and is well respected throughout Washington for not only her passion on the subject, but her amazing teaching ability to get us all excited about doing what we need to do. So, Nancy, take it away.
Great, thank you. I always like it when people applaud before you do anything, and I always have this temptation to say, well, thank you very much and goodbye. Quit while you're ahead. Seems like a good plan. First of all, I'm very grateful that you're all here, particularly because although I think advocacy is important any time, any year, I think this year particularly and next year when city budgets, county budgets, state budget, federal budgets are all in trouble, it is particularly important that people from the nonprofit sector renew their interest in advocacy. And among the things I'm going to be doing are some very basic things. Not because I think you necessarily don't know these, but because in my experience in the training that I do all over the place, I've learned that an awful lot of people don't know the basics about government, don't know the basics about who represents them, don't have a clue how the process works. One of the things that you'll see on the table that's a handout for later is something called a starter kit. Because a woman raised her hand in a little session I was doing. She said, I'm kind of embarrassed to ask this, but do you have a starter kit for people like me? I said, how basic? She said, I remember there are 3 branches. I just don't remember what they do. And over the years, one of the things that I've learned is that a lot of people have not had anything formal since 7th grade social studies. They might have gotten 1 semester in high school, and frequently, until very recently, it was taught by the coach, which might have been good, but in some cases was not so good. So part of what I'm hoping you will take away from today is things that I tell you that you can then use with others, and that you use the assumption in your mind that not everybody knows what you know. So finding ways to convey this easily to people and helping other people to feel comfortable about it is a big part of what we need to do. The other little piece that is very much in my mind goes back to a study that was done a couple of years ago out of Johns Hopkins, and it asked almost 900 nonprofits about their experience with advocacy and lobbying. And they found that a fair number said, oh yes, they do something. But when it came down to what exactly do you do, for the most part it was people signing on to a letter that a coalition they belonged to had sent around, and would you be willing to sign? And very few were doing anything on an ongoing basis. And when people were asked the reasons why they didn't, they said things like lack of staff time, lack of staff knowledge, coalitions will do this for us, public policy not relevant to our organization. I find that hard to believe. Lack of relationships with government officials, worried about violating laws, staff reluctance to get involved, executive director reluctant to get involved, lack of board knowledge. We'll be coming back to that one. Okay, board opposition or reluctance to becoming involved. Anyway, there's quite a long list, and you can imagine that there probably are a fair number of organizations that you know, nonprofits, who are facing one or more of those. So the kinds of things I'm going to give you are things that you don't need special staff for, and you don't need a lot of skills training. I'm going to give you easy things, and it isn't going to take over your lives or the lives of the people that you're talking to. My consultants on this were my niece and her husband, And they are both pediatricians and they have young children. And I asked her about something. I was going off to a group of young medical types, and I said, do you have any advice for me? And she said, Nan, keep it short. We're sleep deprived. If you don't keep it short, we're not doing it. Okay, so I'm going to give you short things, easy things, and with any luck, this is going to move along. Okay, so I've got 5 things on my list. With any kind of luck, we're going to get through all of them, most or all of them. The first, I'm going to cheer you up, because I think things are a little gloomy these days, especially for a lot of us in the nonprofit world. I'm going to run you through some very quick Washington basics about how Washington government is organized, very fast. Then I'm going to give you 5 bite-sized ways to be involved in advocacy. Easy, the ones that my niece said, oh yeah, we could do that. Then, a special word about boards. Is anybody here on a board? Thank you. Now, when we come to that part, we'll probably lock the doors so that you can't get out until I finish that part, but okay, boards. And then I'm going to give you a test. Well, this is because I have been a teacher for years, and that's what you do. You give pop quizzes, and it makes everybody pay attention. Okay, so here we go. Here's the cheering up part. And the cheering up part is because I have run into so many people these days who think that because the budgets are so bad, and they're already hearing this from some of their elected officials, the word is save your breath. Don't even bother. There's no money. And there are also people who are very discouraged, who will actually believe that and will think that they shouldn't give up, that they should give up. And both are wrong. Never save your breath. If you don't speak up, we don't even stand a chance. If we do speak up, we have a chance. And in any case, we have to be the voice for the nonprofit sector, and we have to help other people. We've got to make sure that people know that you can win things even in some bad times. So here's the cheering up part. Okay, raise your hand if you have ever heard of the following laws. Social Security Act. Anybody ever heard of Social Security? Anybody ever heard of disability insurance? Anybody ever heard of single-parent moms, women being eligible for welfare? Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. How about federal involvement in higher education? Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. And I'm taking note, by the way, of anybody who doesn't raise their hand. Okay. How about food stamps, Civil Rights Act? How about Medicare, Medicaid, the WIC program, Head Start? Okay. How about the Americans with Disabilities Act? Okay. Oh, some of you didn't raise your hands for that one. Okay, we're going to come back afterwards. See me afterwards. In any case, the reason I mention all those is because every one of those laws was lobbied for and passed and signed into law in bad budget times. In times when the people in the Congress and the people in the White House were saying, save your breath, there's no money. Social Security Act was passed at the height of the Great Depression. Disability insurance was added during the Korean conflict. Message was the same. Women added to welfare. Before that, we only gave welfare to the children, not to the mothers. So women were added to welfare, and the federal government finally got involved in higher education during the Cold War. People in the White House were saying, there's no money, we've got to fight. You know, we were involved in this great competition with the Soviet Union. Civil Rights Act, food stamps, that was 1964, WIC, Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, neighborhood health centers. That was all part of the time when we were engaged in the Vietnam War, and the message out of the White House and the message out of Congress was save your breath, don't even ask, we don't have money, we're fighting a war. And the Americans with Disabilities Act was lobbied for and signed into law by first President Bush during the first Gulf War. So, moral of the story is, speak up. Even in bad budget times, if we don't speak up, nothing can happen. And besides, we don't expect to win all the time. Of course, we might lose sometimes, but there's a lot at stake. And I don't know about you, but I've been in this stuff a long time, and I'm a bit of a political junkie, and I have never, ever heard a time when the men and women in Congress or the state legislature said, bring it on. This is the good year. Anything you want, you can have. It's not going to happen. If you're going to wait for that, forget about it. It's never going to happen. So, good years and bad, you got to speak up. Absolutely essential. Okay. Now, let's see. Now that we know every law now on the books, good and bad, got there because people spoke up, absolutely. It is now, because it's bad budget times, people hesitate because they don't know what to say. And I'm going to give you a line that you can use and that other people can use. When you are told by someone in an elective position, don't you know the budget's terrible? How can you even ask? You say, I know the budget's terrible. Of course. I just want to make sure that you have good information when you are making the hard choices. And I can give you good information about X, whatever your issue is, whatever your nonprofit is working on. So don't pretend you don't know about the bad budget. Of course we know it's a bad budget. But let them know why you've come. It's so that when they are making those hard choices, they have good information. Incidentally, just about everything I know at the local level has started because some group or somebody got one champion, either on a school board, a city council, a county council, and they then worked with that champion to get something started and then move on to other people. Okay, so you're feeling a little bit more cheered up? Thank you. You should humor me because otherwise I might ask 4 or 5 times and the guys with the cameras will be, very upset about this. Okay, so I'm not going to go over the starter kit. You've got that. It's very basic. Feel free to use it. Feel free to adapt it if you like. It's okay with me. But I just want to run you through a couple of Washington basics. And it helps to keep a few things about our state in mind because it makes it a lot more manageable. So I brought along the map. Just in case. There we go. Here is the state of Washington. Ta-da! Which, of course, you can see from there, right? Very good glasses you're wearing? Yes, okay. Anyway, a couple of very basic points. We have 49 legislative districts. Unlike most states, every district gets 1 senator and 2 representatives. Most states only get 1 representative and 1 senator. We get 1 senator and 2 representatives, so we get a little bit of a bonus. And it is useful to keep in mind that roughly 36 of those 49 districts are up and down the I-5 corridor and on this side of the mountains, which tells you that only 13 are on that side of the mountains because there are fewer people over there. It's by population, right? But anybody living across the mountain should not feel left out because committee chairs can come from absolutely anywhere, and committee chairs are powerful. They set the agenda for their committee. So when you talk with people and encourage them to look up their legislators, encourage them to look up and see whether or not their legislators are chairing a committee or acting as the ranking minority member on the committee. And just in general, to know what committees they sit on. That's a useful thing to know. Plus, leadership can come from any place. Spokane has the Senate Majority Leader, Lisa Brown. The Senate, by the way, this is not racial minorities. This is party minorities, right? And majorities? Okay. So Lisa Brown is the head of the Senate. The minority leader in the Senate is Mike Hewitt. He's from Walla Walla, down, I can't hold the map and point to it, but Walla Walla. Then the minority leader of the House is Richard DeBolt from right down here in Lewis County, mostly rural Lewis County. The only one that comes from the Seattle area is Frank Chopp, and he's the Speaker of the House. And he comes from Seattle. So leadership can come from anywhere, and there are other leadership positions, but those are just the key ones. And to win anything, you have to know, and it helps to keep it in your mind, you have to know capital math, which is something I learned from former Governor Booth Gardner, who came into a group and started off by saying, okay, here are 3 numbers, 25 plus 50 plus 1. Since then, I've added plus 1. So who knows what that stands for? 25 plus 50 plus 1 when we're talking about the state legislature. I can see Putt already knows. Anybody else? Okay, Putt.
It's the number you need to pass the House, the Senate, and the governor.
It's what it takes to win. Because you don't need all 49 of the senators, you just need 51%. And you don't need all 98 of the House members, you just need 51%. And then after something has passed the Senate and the House, it goes to the governor. And the governor can sign or veto. So that's +1. And I add +1 because this is you and me. Because we can influence all of the above. And capital math, by the way, this little illustration is also why smart advocates these days automatically, if they send a message to their senator or one of their representatives, they CC the governor. Because eventually the governor is going to sign or veto, right? And she's going to be asking policy staff in whatever that area is, what have we been hearing from around the state? It's one of the things they factor in as they're making their recommendations to the governor about partial veto or vetoing. And it's so easy these days. You can CC the governor for free. It's great. By the way, you can do the same thing with your city council, your county council. If your city council has 9 people, how many do you need to win? 5, right. If there's a committee that your bill has gone to, you look up how many people are on the committee and you figure out how many you need to win, and then you see who do we know in enough of these places so that we can at least get to 51%. It's not going to guarantee that you win, but it will get on people's radar screens. It'll get through that morass of thousands of bills. 2,500 bills approximately get introduced in our state legislature every year. And ours is a part-time legislature. They only meet for 9 weeks this coming year, 15 weeks the next year after that. So 2,500 bills to deal with in 9 weeks. You've got to cut through that and make sure that they know about your bill and that they know that there are people who are interested. I got a great tip one day from a legislator who said, please tell people why it's so important that they belong to statewide organizations. She said, I might get pounded by the people in my district, and I can walk into caucus. So in her case, she's a member of the House Democratic Caucus. She said, I can walk into caucus waving all the messages I've been getting, saying, look at this, I'm getting pounded on this. And if all the other members around the room say, not me, nope, not hearing anything about that, nope, we can't make it a caucus priority. If enough other members are hearing about it from their districts, they might make it a caucus priority. They might be able to make it move a little bit faster, give it a little extra push. That's not such a tricky thing to do. By the way, just one more thing about this. I love this process. I really love democracy. I was a Peace Corps volunteer right out of college, and so I've lived in places where people didn't have the rights that we have. And boy, I came home with religion on the subject of democracy. And I just love the fact that we get to make noise about this stuff. We get to decide who's going to represent us and how they're going to represent us, and we get to talk to them all the time about this stuff. So it just genuinely pains me when people say, yeah, I don't bother. So please just kind of keep that in mind. I think that's all I'm going to say about the state legislature. Unless, does anybody want to ask anything about this little quickie basics? Yes?
Did you say something about civility in the legislative process and where we are?
Happily. And I'm going to bring the issue, you asked about civility in the process. I'm going to bring the issue right back to us. Because I think we're as guilty as anybody of falling into the snide comments, the little jokes, talking about, oh yeah, it's about time we had some adults in the room over there on the Capitol, you know, who's in charge? And we make bad jokes. One morning on the radio, I heard a commentator say, oh, here's a good one. This was apropos of nothing he was talking about. He said, oh, I heard a good one. How do you address a former felon? Pause. Senator. Don't laugh. There is a sense in which we think it is now fair game to make nasty, snarky comments about everybody in elective office, act like they're all a bunch of jerks who don't have the brains God gave lettuce, are on the take, are just awful people, and yet they are doing a hard job, whether we agree with them or not. I don't agree with them all, but I think they deserve our respect. I know they put in long hours. I know they miss a lot of time with their families, and they deserve us to treat them with civility. Same goes for their staff. who very often get bombarded with nasty, threatening kinds of calls and visits and who don't deserve that. So please, and thank you for mentioning that. I'm for civility. Yeah. Does anybody want me to do a quickie version of how a bill becomes a law? No? Okay, good. No, it's okay. I have a little, very short little version that I sometimes use. Okay. Pardon? No. Okay. So, now that you're cheered up, and now that you know you're reminded of the Washington basics, I'm going to give you the 5 easy ways to get involved. These are things that staff people with very little time can do. This is things that board members can do, your friends, your neighbors can do. These are just easy, easy things. And don't read the thing on the table because, you'll just get distracted. Just wait. Okay. Okay. So the first thing is you're going to sign up for good legislative alerts. Washington nonprofits will start putting out alerts, and I'm told even during the special session in November. But you probably all have groups that you listen to and that are following the issues that you care about. Anybody want to mention a nonprofit that puts out good legislative alerts that you like? Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, yes. Children's Alliance, yes.
Moms Rising.
Moms Rising. Anybody else? Yes. United Ways of Washington. Anybody else want to mention anything else? League of Education Voters, yes. So whatever your issue, talk to other people about it. Find a group that is consistent with your values and that is monitoring the level of government that you're most concerned about. Some of them monitor all 3, but any level of government that you're concerned about. And then sign up for their legislative alerts. It's free. It's easy. It doesn't take any time. The good news about it is that they do the heavy lifting. They will be monitoring what's going on day by day, week by week. They will send out the alerts. They will tell you when your voice is needed. And these days, they will give you a sample message. And the tip here is just urge people to personalize the sample message. It makes a difference. Again, I like to talk to my legislators, and I ask my legislators from time to time, every year or so, say, so how many calls or letters does it take these days to get your attention on an issue? Well, for the last several years, the answer has been, oh gosh, more than one. 10 or 12. That was the most common answer I got, about 10 or 12. And as one fellow said, now that won't buy my vote, but it will rent my attention. Okay, we got to rent their attention. I'm happy to do that. Okay, so this last spring, I asked my senator, I said, I haven't asked you this in a while. What's the answer these days? He said, we get so many robo-letters these days, and sometimes you can't even tell if the people even know what they're writing about. Sometimes the subject line doesn't even match up with the subject, and you think, maybe they are punishing their 12-year-old son for something and saying, get 15 of these sent off to the senator or something. He said, but if I get even 7 or 8 that are clearly personal, I'll assign a staff person to it. Ask your senator, ask your representative. Find out what it is for them. And then use that when you're talking with other people, as I'm going to do in just a minute with you all. But the first thing is, get signed up for those alerts, because you're not going to be in Olympia every day. You're not going to be in the city council every day, the county council every day. You're not going to be in Washington, D.C. every day. But there are people who are, and they can help you. And they know that you're not going to respond every time. But if you respond from time to time, you'll become a familiar name, you'll become a familiar voice in those offices. That's a very good thing. Your legislators, not only should you know who they are, they should know you. And when you call or you walk through the door, they should say, right, children's issues, arts, enviro. They should know what you're there for, just in a general kind of way. Okay, so then the second part, back to 7th grade social studies. Okay, boys and girls, how do we communicate with our elected officials? What are the 3 basic ways? Anybody? Telephone. You can telephone, you can call. Something else. Oh, email, make it broader. You can write, because we can email, we can fax, we can snail mail, we can do all kinds of things. We can tweet, we can do all kinds of things. Some of them not, yeah, okay, we'll stay away from that. And the third reason, the third way? In person, absolutely. So we've got 3 easy ways. And you just want to make sure that you are, no matter what you're doing it with a little personal something. Recently I was with a group for working on homeless issues at the federal level. They gave everybody an already addressed postcard. You could put your name and address on the back, and it had a message and then space to personalize it. Smart. And then they said to the group, if you fill them out now, if you don't want to pay for a stamp, leave them with us and we'll make sure they get there. Perfect. Similarly, a local group that was working on an environmental issue wanted something to go to the Commissioner of Public Lands. Same drill, except they did not leave space for a personal message. So my advice is, if you get one of these, write a little message on the side. I really care. Please don't ignore this. This means a lot to me. Whatever you want to say, let them know that you know, and make sure that your name and address are on there. They need to know that you're a constituent. But that's an easy, easy thing to do. Okay, now, this is where this turns into Oprah. You're going to really like this part. This is very exciting. You're going to get something. No, you're going to get a free cell phone. Oh, this is so exciting. Oh, this is where you squeal. Oh, Oprah, I'm so glad I stayed up all night. Oh, take a cell phone and then pass it around. Oh, this is, come on, squeal, humor me. Wow, this is so exciting. Oh, wow, everybody's getting a cell phone. Did you know you're getting a cell phone? This is so great. They've got plenty. They're going to send them around to you. You're not going to get left out. Oh, wow, look at this. Yeah, you too can do this because I brought along the template. You too can go down to Kinko's. You too can go to any copy place you like. You can put these on the cardstock color of your choosing. Let's see. Oh, there they are. Yes, I knew I had them. You're just so lucky. Yay, the template. You too can spend your lonely hours in front of the TV cutting out little cell phones. Oh, wow, this is so exciting. I won't pass them out now, but be sure and get one, right? Okay, so you bring this little thing. Stick it on your wall, right? You put it on a bulletin board. You help if you're at a gathering or with a staff meeting or just about any place. After services on Sunday, a PTA meeting, whatever. You give them out to people and you say, hey, I can help you find out who represents you. You can look it up on a laptop. If you've got the League of Women Voters pamphlets, you can look it up in those. They're personalized for different areas. You can look it up in 1,000 different ways. You can probably do it by cell phone. You can do all kinds of ways to find out who their legislators are and then say, and I'm giving you your very own cell phone, and you can put your legislators' names on the back so you won't forget. You can empower other people. Another thing you can do, especially if you're working with people who have never done this before, figure out a message that you want to send to one of your legislators from the area, and then have somebody call using that number and put it on speakerphone and let everybody hear what it's like. And I can promise you, I don't know all of the operators personally, but I can promise you they are some of the nicest operators in the Western world. One Saturday, I called, and then I got put on hold. So I went back to my computer, and I was working away. I kind of got distracted. And then, all of a sudden, this cheery voice said, State Capitol, how can I help you? And I had forgotten why I called. So I was kind of fumbling around, and the operator thought that I was nervous. And she said, is this your first time, honey? Well, in the interests of science and research, I said, yes. And it bought me a little time. And then she said, do you know who your representatives are? And I said, no. I lied again. She said, don't worry, honey, I can help you. Just give me your address, and I'll type it in. So we give my address over the phone, right? She types it in. She's sitting at a laptop. She's got one of these gizmos, just like I'm wearing. So she's sitting there. She types it in. And, of course, the 3 people, my senator and 2 representatives, pop up on her screen. She said, oh, honey, you've got nice ones. Okay, it's okay. So then she said, now, what's the issue that you wanted to send a message about? And I told her, and she said, well, you know, since this is your first time, and you've probably you say you've never done this before, I'll read to you. We've been getting a lot of messages about that. I'll read one from the people who are in favor and one from the people who are against, and then you tell me which one you're more comfortable with, and I'll help you work out something. Wow, indeed. Yes. Fabulous service. And by the way, they have TTY for people with hearing difficulties, and they have language translation. And those hours on there, those are only the hours during session. Right now, this time of year, they don't have Saturday hours, and they don't have the later hours. I think they cut off at 4. It's not as long. But it's a fabulous, fabulous service. Anybody can use it. It's very non-intimidating. The other neat thing, I don't know if there are people here who do federal stuff. I do. But there's a switchboard to the U.S. Capitol, 202-224-3121. And one of the neat things you can do with people who've never contacted their federal people before, you can suggest to them that they call after hours. Because if you're feeling shy and you've never done it before, you can talk to the machine. Hello, this is Senator Patty Murray. I'm sorry, but our office is closed, but we'd like to hear from you. I'm very glad you called, blah, 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 blah. At the sound of the beep, please leave your message. And you leave a message for Senator Patty Murray. It's great. And because I used to work in the U.S. Senate and I used to work in D.C., I still like checking in with staff people there. And I said, so what happens with these calls? Oh, they said it's just like all the other messages we get. They go on the tally sheet. We used to have a tally sheet too. Now they have it all worked out on computer. But every call, every message, every written communication, every visit is recorded, who it is, what they want of the senator. And every morning they rotate around the office apparently, and somebody has the job of taking down all the messages that came in overnight. Okay, piece of cake, easy to do, doesn't take very long. You can empower other people. You can help other people to do this. This is your government. Some of you are still looking a little serious. But it's great stuff. It's really great stuff. Okay. So, are you ready for the fourth one? And this is moving along pretty quickly, right? Okay, good. Okay, so the next one is also kind of fun because it is advertise your issue. Sometimes I say, not Nike, but I really don't have anything against Nike. But you can advertise your issue. The Children's Alliance, at one of their annual meetings, they gave out these little bags, carrying my lunch for kids, advertising the issue. A couple years ago, the housing people, somebody mentioned housing. When they had their lobby day in Olympia, they cut out these strips of inexpensive cloth. Everybody wore them. So even from across the Capitol compound, before long, anybody who had seen any one of these knew that everybody who was wearing one of these was there for housing. So you were sending a message even before you had said anything or talked to anybody. People knew you were sending a message about housing. And similarly, I urge people this time of year when we're having candidate forums and issue forums, because we've got an election coming up November 8th, make yourself a conspicuous badge and wear it. For example, I'm part of a hunger group, so we made up a badge that looks like this. One word, bright color. Can you read it even back there?
Yes.
Can you read it back there? See what it is? It says hunger with a slash through it. So think about it. If you've got a group of candidates standing up here, and you've got an audience out there, and you make sure that somebody wearing your badge is sitting up in front, and then there are a few more back there, before long you've sent a political signal. And the political signal is that there are people in this audience who are going to be watching me, listening for what I do or do not say about hunger, and since there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other people wearing the same badge, they're obviously part of an organized group and they obviously communicate with one another. You've already sent a political message. You've advertised your issue. I have another little one. This one is for housing. We turn down the flaps. Oh, it looks like a little house. Isn't that corny? Aw. But it makes the point, right? And one of the people in a group I belong to made flashier, prettier ones. You can make nice ones. But there's another thing you can do, which is very easy. Somebody give me an issue that you care about in just 2 words. Anybody? Child care. Okay, so you've signed up for the legislative alerts. Those same groups that send out the alerts tend to put fact sheets on their websites. You've downloaded 10 or 12 of those. You're on your way to Olympia. You come down to Olympia or a candidate forum or wherever, but because we're in Olympia, we'll use that example. You put in here enough copies of that fact sheet with your message on it, in which you've now put your name and address so it's personalized and they know it's from a constituent. You put copies in here, low cost, inexpensive, easy, and you might bring people from your nonprofit, people that you're serving, people that you help who care about childcare, and you bring a few extra for staff and a few extra just in case. And then as you're walking around the building, you will be told by the guards that you're not allowed to bring a protest sign into the Capitol building. Not allowed. But if you just happen to have a folder and you just happen to clutch it to your chest, and you just happen to wander around, and you know, when you come down to Olympia, you'll find you can just walk up to people and say, isn't this place friendly? People are so friendly. And you know what? I love that dome. Have you ever noticed? Isn't that a gorgeous dome? I just love it. This place, it's so easy to just strike up conversations with people, isn't it? But sometimes these committee rooms, they get so hot, don't they? Yeah. Because, you know, there's so many people, they get really crowded. I don't know if you notice that. Has anybody missed the point? I have taken to Olympia people from a group home for the mentally ill. I've taken homeless teenagers. I've taken any number of people who start out scared to death and say, I don't know what to say. I can't talk to them. And I said, you don't have to. Just carry your folder. The only trick is don't carry it like this. Carry it like this. And sure enough, after a while, somebody will ask them about, oh, what is that about? How come you're carrying that? And they strike up conversations, and it gets easier and easier. Advertise your issue. We have candidate forums. We've got all kinds of possibilities. Lately, I think I forgot to bring it today, but I made myself a little badge that says, I'm with Buffett. and I've put a straight pin in it, and I've been wearing it around. And it has been a hoot, because the people who most often commented are the clerks in stores and in the banks and stuff, and they say, sometimes they say, so what's that about? And in the bank, this very nice young lady, I said, well, have you ever heard of Warren Buffett? And she said, well, yeah, I think he's my boss. I said, well, you know, he says he thinks that multimillionaires like him shouldn't be paying a lower rate of taxes than people like the secretaries in his office. And I'm with Buffett. I think that's fair. And she said, I'm with Buffett. I'm making one of those. So, but you can strike up conversations. All kinds of things can happen. Low cost, easy, empowering. You don't have to be a fancy person. When people say they don't have the resources, they don't have the skills, they don't have the training, if you have the resources, skills, and ability to write 2 words on a piece of cardstock, you can be an advocate. You know, my favorite definition of advocacy is 2 words. Speaking up. You got to speak up. And sometimes you speak up by writing something, and sometimes you speak up by saying something, and sometimes by wearing a badge. Just all kinds of ways. Okay, so let's see. By the way, would somebody warn me, would you care to warn me how much time I've taken? Because I thought I was paying attention, but I didn't. So what do we have left? We're about halfway. Wow. Okay, in that case, we'll definitely have time for the test. Okay, that's good. And possibly also a little exercise I have in mind. Okay, so the last on the list of 5 here is that I want you to think about talking. Think of the number of times you have been at any kind of gathering, any kind of meeting, and somebody says, okay, before we break up, any announcements? Anybody want to say anything? And everybody just sits there. Well, if you're getting those legislative alerts, you know a message, you've got an announcement, make it. By the way, do people know what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Has anybody besides me heard X? Do you know that right now it's a critical time for votes on such and such? We've got initiatives that are going to be on the ballot, and I'll bet a lot of people aren't following it closely. The one I'm really concerned about is make a little announcement. You tell people, you talk up, or you speak up at any kind of gathering that you go to. Or, this is actually one that goes back to my early days in Washington, D.C., And I got on the subway, the metro in Washington, D.C. It was jam-packed. It was rush hour in the morning. People were just crowded in. And I spotted a woman I know about 3/4 of the way down the car. And when I, got in and kind of wiggled my way in, she saw me. She waved. I waved back to her. Hi, yeah. And then just as the subway car lurched into motion, she waved again. Oh, yeah. And she said, "Hey, Nancy." Yeah. Well, now I've waved twice, so I can't pretend I don't know her, right? Okay. So, yeah. She said, "Did you hear what the Senate Human Resources Committee did yesterday?" Here we are in front of God and everybody, and I can't pretend I don't know her. So I said, "No, what?" "Well," she said, "they did something yesterday that's going to affect every working family in America, and I'll bet most people don't even know about it yet." At which point I caught on, and I started feeding her straight lines. "No, really, tell me more." "Well," she said, "oh, come on, what else are they doing?" "Well," she said, "before long, the people in that subway car are like people at a ping pong match. They're going bong, 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 bong. They're following this conversation." When she got out her end, I got out my end. I caught up with her in the Metro Center stop, if you can imagine, and I had to elbow my way over to her. I said, "What you just did down there was fabulous. Those people were just lobbied by a pro. Do you do that very often?" I said, "I do it all the time." "I love subways," she said. They can't get off. Okay, so I tell this to my students at the UW, right? And I happen to mention that one of my favorite places for doing this little technique is grocery stores. Because you know that the grocery store line that you get into turns out to be the one that stops. You think you're in the fastest line, and you're not, because that woman has to have 3 things price checked, and you're sitting there thinking, "I do not have time for this. This is not a day when I..." No, don't think like that. Think advocacy opportunity, and turn to somebody in the other line and say, "Hey, you look familiar." "Me?" "Yeah, I'm sure I've seen you. Hey, did you hear what they're talking about doing in Olympia?" And right? So you carry on a conversation. What's he going to do? Abandon his basket? It's not going to happen. Okay, so I tell this to my students. The next week, one of my students comes in, and she says, "You know what you said about the grocery store? You don't know this about me, but in addition to being a grad student, I have a part-time job in a grocery store. And I just couldn't do that to my friends. But I got on the bus the other day in the U District, and I looked around and I thought, wow, this looks like it's pretty much all people from the UW. And it was about the time they were talking about raising student tuitions." She said, "So I pretended that my phone was vibrating. I pulled it out and said, 'Yeah?' 'Oh, yeah. Oh, you know why I called you? You know what they're talking about doing in Olympia? They're talking about raising student tuitions at all state universities and community colleges.' 'No, it's not too late.' 'No. There's a toll-free line. You can call.' She said, no, you don't have to go get a pencil. No, I'll repeat it." She repeated the number 4 times. She said, "People up and down the car, they're punching it into their phones, they're writing it down." She said, and then she looked up and she realized she was getting to her stop. She said, "Oops, gotta go, bye." She said, nobody knew there was nobody at the other end. You want to be an advocate? Be an advocate. You got lots of opportunities. You just have to, okay, so you have to be a little bit brassy, but you can also do it in quiet ways. Okay, so those are the 5 things on there. And on the back, there's a little sample message that you can use. And it's got 2 versions, one where you can just tell a personal story, and the other where you can talk about the impact on the district, a district impact story. It's just got, because everybody should have at least one 30-second story in their head, so that if you just happen to run into your senator at the farmer's market on Saturday, you can walk up and say, "I don't need to hold you up right now. I just want to mention that I'm really concerned about
Habitat for Humanity,
habitat
low-income housing.
and low-income housing, and I know you're busy right now, and I don't want to take you away from all this wonderful food, but I'm going to be talking to you more about it later. Bye." I think they're a great organization. And if you're on a board, you can say, "And I'm on their board, and I hope that when their staff come around to talk to you, you'll hear them out." So you don't have to be worried about being the expert, but you're lending them your credibility. So those are the 5 things. Now, there is a reason why all of this works. And it comes back to a classic political story. Some of you have heard me tell it, probably many times. So if I drop dead in the middle, would you just finish it? Because there's no point in ruining a good story for somebody who's already dead. Okay, so, but this is the reason why everything I've just told you works. And it is a classic, so it has to begin like a classic. Once upon a time, there was a fellow who was newly elected to the United States Senate. And it kind of went to his head. And the first time he was invited to a fancy banquet, he showed up early. He thought, people will come early just to see me. But of course, nobody did. So he found himself in this lovely hotel banquet hall, and he's the only one there, except for the waitress. And the waitress was, of course, doing her job. And since this was a fancy banquet, they were not going to share anything at this table. In fact, they weren't even going to share a butter plate. No, no, no. She was putting out butter on everybody's personal butter plate. So since nobody else was there, he kind of watched her, and she was going methodically around the room. Every time she saw one plate, she put 1 pat of butter. One plate, got 1 pat of butter. One plate, 1 pat of butter. One plate, 1 pat of butter. Finally, she came to him, and he said, excuse me, I really like butter. Think I could, have another pat of butter? She said, sorry, sir, we treat everyone the same. 1 plate gets 1 pat of butter. She went right on. He was miffed. He thought about it. There's still nobody else in the room. So he got up and he went over to her. She's now at another table. He said, maybe you don't know who I am. I'm a United States Senator. She said, maybe you don't know who I am. I'm the one that gives out the butter. And I tell you this because votes are like butter, and you are the ones that give out the butter. You have something that every candidate and every elected official from school board right to the President of the United States wants. And when you put out your hand and you say, hi, I'm Nancy and I live in your district, little voice in the back of the brain says, butter. And I'm part of a group in your district that we call ourselves the U-District Conversation on Homelessness. And we probably have about 80 people by now on our mailing list, and we get together regularly every month. Butter, butter. And we are part of a much larger statewide coalition concerned about housing and homelessness, and I can bet you we touch the lives of thousands of people across this state absolutely every month. You just caused a cholesterol hit. And if you could cause a little heart attack, even better. Yes, that's it. So if you ever doubt that you can make a difference and that this stuff works, think of 2 words. You've heard one now, butter. The other is mammograms. And if you want to put mammograms and butter together in your mind, that is your problem and not mine. But the reason for the mammograms goes back to that little quiz I gave you. In 1965, when Congress passed Medicare, they did not include coverage for mammograms. Today they do. And how do you suppose that happened? And now I'm going to look at the men in the room. Do you think the guys in Congress, and they are still mostly guys, do you think they think a lot about mammograms? Do you think when they're getting ready to go down to the house gym and pump a little iron, they're thinking, mammograms, I can't stand it any longer. And remember, we're not talking young chicks. We're talking old ladies. Do you think that's what they're thinking about? Do you think the men in the Congress we're given a lot of thought to mammograms? You think that's why the law changed? Ha! It's because the rest of us called up and wrote up. Oh, and by the way, those were the poor old ladies who couldn't get the mammograms. The rich old ladies could pay for them, right? So these were not the check-writing old ladies. Okay, so now today, you can get your mammogram covered if you're over 65 or over 60 or on Medicare. Good, because the rest of us called up and wrote up and spoke up until those guys in Congress said, okay, we'll cover mammograms. Just stop talking about the mammograms. It's the butter. The butter works. The butter is at work. Okay, so I'm going to pause there. Did anybody want to ask anything about this stuff before I move on? Yes? Yeah. Well, there are 2 things that I've learned being around people in public life and how they feel about immigrants. It is that they know that today's immigrant is tomorrow's potential voter. And they also know that immigrants are very often part of organizations, which is why you want to say, and I belong to, and we have X number of people in your district. So you convey the butter, even if you are not yet a voter, you let them know that you're connected to other people who do have the vote. It's a very important thing. Anybody else want to ask? Yes?
How do you know if it's too much to communicate with your legislator on a particular issue? When is it just annoying?
When is it just annoying? Well, I urge people to be persistent but not a stalker. And you can always start off by saying, I know you've heard from me on this before. I don't mean to be annoying. I just want to make sure you know how important it is to me, or to the people that I work with, or to the people we serve, or whatever. So you just do it in a polite way and you make it nice. What you don't ever want to do is something that a lot of people unfortunately do, which is be nasty. I went to a Seattle school board meeting one night because I've been doing some work on civics education with some teachers. It was terrible. I think most of the people who stood up said nasty things to the school board members and did not obey the rules that were clearly posted there about no ad hominem attacks, pay attention to the time. It just, real basic rules, like when the light goes off, wrap up your sentence. People said, you can't tell me. Oh, you people, you never listen to anybody. And they were just mean. And I thought, boy, I don't know whoever said that was an effective way to get somebody to listen to you, but it sure didn't work for me. I was quite shocked by it. So you don't want to be annoying, but you do want to be persistent. I'm going to give you something that this one we're not going to have time for, but you're going to quickly get the point. It won't be hard at all. And I'm just going to pass it out quickly. I'll let you move this around. Just take a few and pass it around. I think there are maybe 10 in that bundle, so you'll get them. So this is a little exercise that I learned from a group when I was doing some work with children's hospitals. And we were working with the boards of children's hospitals all across the country. And when I first saw this little exercise that one of my colleagues brought along, I thought, boy, this is going to look so kindergarten. People are not going to be interested in this because we had physicians and trustees and, big important people in the community, and this looked like such a little rinky-dink kind of thing. But, oh, did I give you the quiz? Oh, I thought I was just giving you the exercise. Well, did I give you the answers? Oh, no. Oh, dang. Well, you're getting the quiz. Well, I guess I had too few of the others, and you started getting the quiz. So we better get the quiz out first. Okay, so anybody else need the quiz? Anybody else not get the quiz? Apparently my collating was not very effective. Okay, you need a quiz. Otherwise, you can share with somebody. Do you have one? You can share with somebody. Okay, well, I'll finish up the story about this little exercise later, because now that you've got the quiz, you've got to take the quiz. Anybody else need it? Okay, everybody take the quiz. Now, this is an open mouth quiz. You can ask anybody else, do it as fast as you can, fill in as many answers as you can. Anybody else need one? And then I'll go back and I'll finish up the story about that little exercise. Did I really give you the answers? No. Oh, thank you. Phew. Okay, good. And you are allowed to ask. Oh, and by the way, do we have anybody here who's a public employee who works for city, county, or state government? This is the rules for public employees and what you can and cannot do. And I always urge people to run it past the attorney or the lawyer in your office and say, are there any special rules that apply to us? But this has been approved by attorneys for a city agency some years ago. Yeah. You too? Yeah. So you're not even asking each other for the answers? Wow. Wow. You really do know a lot.
I know nothing, so I'm hoping the rest of you at the table are doing good.
Well, see if you've got anybody sitting around you who was raised in local schools. They are the ones who might know that.
I do. She's a, well, a friend of mine. Yeah. We used to be in Rotary.
As you might imagine, it has an advocacy story to go with it.
Diane.
I wrote 98, obviously, doubling things. But I don't know what the star was. I'm not sure. No. What is the state? Yeah. Damn it.
So how much more? Oh,
24 hours.
oh, look at this.
I cheated in the answer for when does the legislature meet. I said January.
I know it. It's like
Second Tuesday after the first Monday or something.
January, flower versions. They have that day. Well,
Oh, but that's 2011.
there's also 2 other states that well, originally said no.
So is there anybody who needs a little help finding out who your legislators are? Anybody want to know who your legislators are?
State rock and roll.
Well, of course. So you have to find where you live. Now, this is the Puget Sound area, but this is the state.
In Olympia.
Okay.
So, right on this probably.
Varies from
Well, you're looking for the red. So 22. Yeah. Oh, good for you. Yeah. I didn't think to mention that, but you're right.
those are property taxes.
Okay. Just keep missing the right page here. Okay. These are your 3. Anybody else need to find their legislators? Are you Puget Sound or? Oh, good. Good for you. It's going to be 9 weeks next year. So did you find, you want the red number. The red number is your legislative district number.
You have that.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Easy. That's you. Hmm. Are you looking yours up on your? You can. No, go ahead. You can go to www.ledge.wa.gov. That's on the little phone. Yeah. Yeah. And then you just put in your address. So you're 35th and you found your peep? Yep. Good. Anybody else need to find their people? Who your legislators are? Anybody else need help getting their legislators? No, you got some? Well, good. Okay. Do you know where you live? I think you're right, because we just looked up your 22nd, maybe? Okay. Here we go. So if you're in the 22nd, Karen Fraser's your senator, Chris Reichdahl, and Sam Hunt. Got it. Okay, good. Anybody else need to find their legislators? Good. Oh, yeah. It might be.
You have to look
Yeah.
at,
Go ahead, just move in.
look at all of the taxes.
You're looking for the red number,
Sales tax, I mean, look at all of the other taxes.
and if you're in the Puget Sound area, we'll flip it over because it's easier to find.
And
22, we just found that for somebody
I
else.
think it's Karen Fraser.
Senator Karen Fraser, Chris Reichdahl, and Sam Hunt.
Sam Hunt.
Oh, yeah. You've got nice ones.
I
There you go.
used to serve on
Sharon Nelson.
body
Eileen Cody, she chairs the healthcare committee. Very useful. The senator is Sharon Nelson. She moved up when I think Joe, what's his name, used to be the senator, and then he moved to county council, and she moved up into the Senate seat, and now Fitzgibbon moved into her place. Is the other representative? Yes. So the two reps are Cody and Fitzgibbon. Nelson. Anybody else need to find their guys? You need to find your guys? Nope. Okay.
We have a lot of women. I don't think so. I think
Apparently. You don't? Are you from Oregon? You're Californicators. Wow.
There are several.
Colorado. I've done advocacy training in Colorado and California. I have. Yes. It's fun. It's great fun. I like them a lot. Okay, does everybody have your answers? So, how many senators are in the Washington State Senate? If I'd known we were going to have California people here, I would have brought the California quiz and I would have brought the Colorado quiz, because I have them. We could have embarrassed you just along with everybody else. Okay, how many senators? 49. How many does it take to win? 25. Number of representatives? 98. How many does it take to win? 50. Number of legislative districts with low-income people? All of them. And this is just, it's true of anybody. Don't ever think that there's a legislative district where your issue can't be made important to the legislators of the district, whatever the issue. How many of you were able to name your senator and 2 representatives? Okay, so some of you still can't, but I can help you when we take a break, because it's easy to do. I've got the map and I've got the League of Women Voters pamphlet, and we can do it. How many years long is a senator's term? I didn't mention it, but 4. At the federal level, where we get 2 U.S. senators and 1 representative, it's 6 years for the senators, 2 years for the representative at both ends. And by the way, a surprising number of people do not know that their U.S. senator and their state senator are different people. Well, it goes back to we don't teach civics, and we don't teach people after about 7th grade, or maybe if we're lucky, junior or senior year in high school. So if we aren't talking to young people, please don't assume people know the difference. Make a point of it. Are there term limits in Washington? No. California, yes. We do not have term limits. The ballot box is the term limit. What percentage are female? 33. Anybody know nationally what the percentage is for women in the U.S. Congress? 16. Maybe 17 by now. It's pitiful. What's the one thing the legislature must do? I didn't mention that, but I heard some people over here. I think you had the answer. No? Okay. They must pass a balanced budget. They do not have to pass any of those 2,500 bills that are introduced. They must pass a balanced budget. Otherwise, they can't fund state government, and it closes down. Name the current governor. Gregoire. What can she do with legislation she doesn't like? Veto. Who's the Speaker of the House? Frank Chopp. Who is the Majority Leader of the Senate? Lisa Brown. Do you remember who the Minority Leader is in the House? Richard DeBolt. Good. And the Minority Leader in the Senate? Mike Hewitt. From Walla Walla. What do committee chairs do? Set the agenda for their committee. Very important. Some of them are very collegial and consult with the other members of their committee in deciding which bills are going to be heard. Others are more autocratic. So get to know your committee chair for the bills that you care about. When does the legislature meet next year? January into March. Yeah, it's 9 weeks. And I think it starts the 9th of January and then for 9 weeks. What is the state gem? It's petrified wood. Yes. Well, I was told a story. I was told a story, which is why I like putting this on the list. And that is that apparently, you know how fourth or seventh grade teachers sometimes will put the students through learning how a bill becomes a law by having them pick out a state candy or a state insect or a state whatever? Well, one year they decided to try for a state gem. And people over on the eastern side of the mountains knew that they had just designated the petrified forest as a state forest. And they thought, oh, it might attract tourists if we had a state gem that was petrified wood. And apparently, the kids on this side of the mountains were not interested in gems, and the kids on the other side and their teachers were very interested, so they were big advocates, and the ones on this side didn't bother to vote, and that's why we have something that's not even a gem. It's a fossil, but petrified wood. Okay, so it's an advocacy story. All right, now everybody in unison. What is the toll-free line to the Capitol? Everybody. 1-800-562-6000. Some of you did not say it. Do it again. 1-800-562-6000. I don't think you said that out loud. Okay, use it early and often. Of the 50 states, where do we rank in terms of taxes per $1,000 of personal income? Anybody else? We're smack in the middle. We are also judged the most unfair tax system in the United States, but by this standard, we're right smack in the middle. Very interesting. Okay, so let me finish up the story about the little exercise that apparently I didn't give out because I had the quiz instead. I thought I had the other one. I'm just going to tell you about it, and then I want to say a few words about boards, and then we'll wrap it up. The little exercise that I thought I was handing out has something so simple you could jot it down and you could reproduce it when you get home. It said group, means of communication, estimated number. And the exercise we put everybody through was sitting at their tables. They had a table copy, but each had an individual copy. And they were to jot down any group to which they had any connection. And there were like 10 or 12 lines on the left side of the page. So group, and then they were to jot down, how do you communicate with the people in that group? Email, Facebook, telephone. If it's your mother-in-law and extended family, maybe you get together every Sunday for a lunch. How do you communicate? And approximately how many people are in the group? And part of what happens when people start on this little exercise, they start off by saying, I'm not a joiner. No, I don't have time for groups. I don't belong to groups. So you have to kind of coax them. And you wander around and you say, so, isn't there anybody that you ever talk to? I mean, do you have a family? Oh yeah, I have a family. So how many people are in the family? How do you communicate with them? Oh, okay, I'll put that one down. And before long, people are hearing other people mention things. Oh, there's a book group. Or, well, there are a couple of guys I run with in the morning. Does that count? Sure. I play poker regularly with a couple of people. Oh, yeah, that counts. So before long, people are starting to think. And what happens is that they start to see that they are more connected to others than they think they are. And then everybody gives themselves a total. And then you get a table total. And then if you're the person standing up here at the flip chart, you ask for each table to report in and to name a group that was either interesting or that hasn't been mentioned before. And before long, you have somebody say, well, I'm a Boy Scout leader. We got 20 boys in the troop. Can I put down the boys and their parents? Sure. Oh, good. Okay. So now we got, like 45 or something. Okay. And then a little later, that same guy may put his hand back up and say, hey, but statewide, we got a couple thousand boys. Can I put that down? Sure. There are no rules, right? A little later, he's asking, what about nationally? Whoa, 6 million. Okay, but be sure to put yourself down. So 6 million and one. Great. Anyway, part of what happens is you get people thinking in, you don't even have to call it political terms, but it is, because part of what we need to do as advocates is make sure that other people hear us. And even though I do that little business about you talk in a hokey kind of way, the point is serious. We need to talk about our issues to other people and get them thinking about them and get them hearing about them. And if they hear about things from people they know and respect, so much the better. Organizers know a little mantra. People respond most readily to those they regard as their peers. It doesn't mean we will agree with everything a peer says, but if you have a lawyer on your board, ask your lawyer to go talk to other lawyers. If you've got a doctor on your board, ask your doctor to talk to other doctors. Find an opportunity at a professional meeting or when they play golf together or whatever to talk it up with their peers, because we hear things more readily from our peers. And if you've got somebody young on your board, have it that be the person that goes out to the colleges or the community college or the high school. Somebody who's a little younger, it doesn't look like me. You want to think in terms of how are we connected? And if you could, after you've done the little exercise, think about, could you spread the word about a key issue to everybody on that list? Well, some you couldn't. Couldn't get all 6 million Boy Scouts. But you could get a lot more people hearing about your issue, and some of them will respond. And some of them will be inspired to do something because they'll have heard about it from somebody they know. Just a very simple little exercise. Anybody can do it. Low cost, easy. Okay. The last thing I want to do is talk a little bit about boards. And one of the reasons I want to mention boards is very practical. Every year when they put out this pictorial guide to the legislature, I get a copy and I look at the bios. And these are the small bios. You notice these are not the long biographical statements. These are not their long CVs. This is, what do you want people to know about you when you only have a couple of inches, right? And one of the things I look for when I go through these, I look to see how many of them mention that they are connected to a nonprofit in their community and or are board members. And every year, even in these little bios, even without going to the longer bios, it's routinely half or more. Legislators, elected officials, frequently get a start in a community by serving on a board, a group that they feel something toward and that gives them a little prominence in their community. They know what it means to be a board member. And if your board members are not reaching out to them and using that, you are missing a huge opportunity. It's a waste. We should have every board member of every nonprofit contacting their elected officials. And if they don't feel comfortable being the expert on the subject, no problem. It's a kind of, I think of it as a kind of tithing. You know how we talk about you can tithe your income, you give 10% of your income? Well, I tell people, use a portion. It can be a minute. Use a portion of every contact you have with an elected official to mention the nonprofit you're associated with. So that at the end of a conversation that has to do with business matters or whatever it is your board members are talking about, if they say, and before we leave, I don't know if you know it, but I'm also on the board of Habitat for Humanity in our community. I think they do great work. I'm not the expert, but I hope that when they come for you for a meeting that you'll listen to them. I think they're great. You are lending your credibility to that organization. And please, please, please ask your board members to do that simple thing. If they are willing to go a little farther, I have a couple of things I think every board should have. Every board should have an advocacy committee of the board. And that advocacy committee should have an advocacy calendar that lays out for them things they should do at different times of the year. So, for example, most years in the fall, they would be getting ready for the legislative session that starts in January. In the summer, they would be getting ready for the budgets that cities and counties work on in the fall. Or the summer, especially in legislatures like ours and Colorado's, we are not full-time legislatures. So in the summer, they tend to be back home in the district. This is a good time to have a site visit, to invite the legislators to come and see what you actually do, the people you serve, what kind of services you could provide. Site visits are great in the summertime when they're back home in the district, or whenever they're home in the district, or when your members of Congress are back home in the district. But you should lay out a few key things that you are hoping they will do, and then because you now have an advocacy committee of the board, they will report every board meeting. And over time, people will get a little smarter about it, a little more confident about it, and it doesn't fall on already overworked staff, though there might be a staff person who particularly likes this and is interested and might work with the board on that. That's great. But you don't have to think of it as a huge burden. Just think of it as one of the functions of any board. And think of that board and those board members as this amazing resource. And get yourself the bios. By the way, one of the other reasons I like this is you look at these, a lot of times the pictures are out of date, and you look and you say, whoa, he had hair. Oh, all right. Whoa, look at that one. Anyway, but you can imagine that there are some very simple things that even people who have very busy lives and who don't have a lot of extra time could indeed do as part of their board functions and their board activities. So I'm urging you to think about that and take that on and take seriously the possibility that your board could be one of your biggest assets, not just for fundraising, not just for showing up, not just for a name on a letterhead, but for this. I think I should probably check and see if I didn't eliminate something really important here, which is certainly possible. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not going to worry about it. Oh, I know. I do want to tell you one story, and then I'll, yeah. Okay, so a few years ago, I was working with somebody else from a national organization that had nonprofits all over the country, and we were doing board training all over the country. And we were recommending in every place that they do this, and also that their board members, as one of the things that they would put on their advocacy calendar, was conversations or presentations about the agency and its work to groups of their peers. And we let the board, in each case, decide how many of those they would do over which period of time. And it didn't have to be anything big and formal. You know, it could be something like if you're a lawyer, you speak up at the Bar Association meeting. Or if you are active in a faith community, you speak up after services when they have these little gatherings between services or something. But you find an opportunity to talk about the organization, the nonprofit, and its work with groups of your peers. So some months later, I happened to run into the director of a multi-county agency down in Kentucky. It was a mental health agency. And I ran into him at a national conference. And I said, I'm just really curious. How has that been going with your board? And you know, what's been happening? And he said, oh, so glad you asked. He said, you know, that one little item you suggested, you know, that they decide to make presentations to groups of their peers? Well, our board originally said they would do 3 in the next 12 months. Each of them would do 3 presentations to groups of their peers over the next 12 months. He said, and then an interesting thing happened. They started doing these presentations, and before long, they were getting a lot of kudos from their peers. And they were coming back into board meetings and saying, well, the Bar Association asked me to come back and talk again, or I got a standing ovation. Now, mind you, there were only 12 people in the room, but it was, you know, it felt great. Or anyway, he said, so then they decided to ratchet up, and they're now doing 6 over 6 months. And he said, for me as the ED, he said 2 things have happened that I never expected. One, everywhere I go in the community, people know about my organization, and they've heard about it from somebody that they regard as a peer. And secondly, it has positioned me a lot better for fundraising for the same reason. Because every place I go to talk about the organization, when I'm always going to be making a pitch, they've already heard about me from somebody they know and respect. And it's made it much easier. He said, I never expected it. It's been great. So think about a little device like that. These do not have to be big deal things. You can let people decide for themselves how much they think they will take on. They can amend it over time, but just make sure that they're involved. Okay, so last story. Unless anybody wants to ask anything, but last story. I was down in Houston, at the University of Houston, and there was a student who came to, I think, just about everything I was in, but never said anything until the last class on the last day. She raised her hand and she said, look, this may be a cop-out, but I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I've got a part-time job, and I'm also a part-time student. There is just no way I can be a full-time advocate. I said, of course you're right. That is a cop-out. Most of us will never have the luxury of being full-time advocates. But as long as somebody needs your voice, the obligation is lifetime, not full-time. And if right now in your life you can give 2 minutes a week, that's the obligation. And if at some point in your life you win the lottery and you can give full-time, then that's the obligation. But don't ever let yourself off the hook. As long as somebody needs your voice, the obligation is lifetime. That's what advocacy is all about. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Nancy. Woo-hoo.
Okay.
Excellent. Well, I hope that you are all energized. And I did want to say that Nancy has this book called So You Want to Make a Difference. And it's one way she supports her work, and all her stories, many of her stories that you heard today are in it, so you don't have to remember them all. I highly recommend giving it a look. It'll be on the back table there.
But with one correction.
What's
it does
that?
not support my work.
It doesn't.
I am on the board of an organization in Washington, D.C., and I gave them the book, and they get all the proceeds.
Excellent.
That's
Even
what
better.
board members do.
So this is OMB Watch that's on the back. That's the organization. So it supports their work, which Nancy, of course, supports. Excellent. Even better. So take a look. It's got the primer information in there and many of those stories, like the butter story is in there. So love it. And the cell phones. Excellent. So how many of you are going to talk to someone about an issue that you're passionate about? All right.
Oh, wait a second. Some people did not raise their hands.
All right.
Would you ask the question again?
How many people are going to talk to someone about an issue you're passionate about? No bent elbows.
Okay, much better.
All right. And how many of you are going to start up that conversation on the bus or the subway? Okay. Well, that'll be, Advocacy 201 or something. So thank you very much, Nancy. I am certainly personally jazzed about learning all this stuff and getting even more involved. Washington Nonprofits, one of our main tenets is to gather the voice of nonprofits and do that public policy and advocacy work. And so we hope to hear from all of you so we know what's important to nonprofit folks across the state. We are going to do a break right now. The caterers are just finishing setting up. The bar will be open momentarily, and our presentation will begin just after 5. So please use this time to network among yourself. Thank you.
Matthew, how are you? Good to see you again. Yes. What's